Patrick Tuohey is here on KCMO Talk Radio. He is with the Show Me Institute on 95.7 FM and streaming all morning long at KCMOTalkRadio.com as well. All right, Patrick. Well, are you standing by this idea that the Royals may stay at the K? Are you still going to double down on that one, my man?
It seems to be more likely than ever. I read the statement the Royals put out about Leawood. It seems to be kind of a non-statement, but I have no idea what's going on. I'm sure all the local leaders all over Kansas City that are in negotiations with the Royals, if there are any, have all signed non-disclosure agreements. So a lot may be happening that we're not aware of, but it sure feels like nothing is happening.
That is true. It certainly feels that way. But as you and I both know, the minute we say, hey, nothing's happening, something's going to happen. I mean, it would make sense for them to just bury this thing right before Christmas when no one's paying attention, media people are taking off, and they can just jam something through end of the year.
Oh, yes. And a competent, well-run organization could do something like that. But nothing in the past 2 years tells me that the Royals are a competent, well-run organization. They set up deadlines that they don't meet, and they should have not set those deadlines in the first place. So that's the kind of thing that tells me that they don't have their act together. But again, I'm looking at it from the outside, so I don't see a great situation for the Royals. But I have to admit, I don't know.
Well, I would agree with just the incompetency and the way they were caught off guard, I think, by the politics of all this has really screwed them a lot of ways. I agree with that. All right, speaking of the politics of things, Patrick Tuohey's here on KCMO. Two recent Kansas City area stories that I want to highlight with you. Planners have told a local development group that it must revise proposed building heights down the plaza to gain approval. What's going on down there on the plaza, and what's your take on it?
So the guys who own the plaza want to build higher than what the city regulations allow for. Mm-hmm. It sounds like they want to go up to 20 stories for apartment complexes or hotels. That would dramatically change the way the plaza looks. I think maybe before you came to town, there was a big debate in the city over the bowl plan, which basically it shows that the plaza should be low rise in the center with graduating high height development on the periphery. Polzanelli wanted to build something really tall for themselves right in the middle of the plaza, and that was swatted down. So Kansas City has talked about this. Obviously, Country Club Plaza is a value to us, and the developers or the property owners that bought the plaza a few years ago knew what the rules were. But they want to build more, and I understand that. They want to squeeze as much value out of that place as possible, and so they've gone to the city with these plans. I suspect, frankly, that they will be happy with a 4 or 6 story structure. Maybe they were just asking for 15, 20 just as a negotiating tactic. But it remains to be seen. The plaza is such an iconic, historic part of the city. It's beautiful. Those guys own it. They're going to want to protect that. But it would be a shame if it just looks like kind of any other shopping environment.
So I want to ask you about this. I was talking to someone who knows Kansas City government very, very well. And I said to them, hey, we all know these developers go to the city. They want, every incentive in the book, right? Yeah. But then they also go to this Port KC organization that also can give away incentives. But the difference is no one's really held accountable with Port KC. It's kind of a bunch of appointed people who are not held to any kind of standards by the voters, at least if the city council approves TIF money or incentives for a developer. Those people obviously have to face the voters. This whole Port KC scam, it drives me nuts, and I feel like it never gets enough attention in this town, where it's a made-up group that can just give away incentives to anybody and everybody on a whim with really no checks and balances. What's your take on it?
Well, I agree with that. I wrote a column in the Kansas City Star a few months ago pointing out exactly that the Port KC is poorly governed, it is not transparent, and it is increasingly powerful. The amount of money they divert away from public funds to give to developers is growing dramatically. Their own financial audits say that they do not have the proper internal controls to avoid fraud internally, which is what happened at the Economic Development Corporation in Kansas City a few years ago. It turned out their treasurer was stealing millions from them. The board is appointed solely by Mayor Lucas. The city council does not get to weigh in. And John Stevens, who runs Port KC, isn't really a developer. He's kind of a PR guy. And his history in Kansas City has been going to bat, literally, in the case of the T-Bones, for anybody who wanted public funds. So asking Port KC for money is like pushing on an open door. They say yes to a great deal, and their budget comes from the fees paid by the developers they say yes to. So they are operating under a conflict of interest. It's a horrible way to run government.
Can they just? Can Kansas City just shut the whole thing down? I mean, could it be that simple? And why would the city want to compete with Port KC for incentives? Because I'm starting to hear some frustration at City Hall where they're like, "Wait, what? Port KC is doing what? They're giving away what?" Like, I'm starting to hear some of that, and I'm wondering if it's as simple as the city council saying, "You know what is the point of this thing anyway?"
That's a good question. Certainly right now, the mayor could just appoint people who are much more willing to pay attention to Port KC and do a better job of oversight. That's the simplest way. Perhaps the city council could require that appointments to the Port KC board receive their approval. But again, that is the way it was with the Economic Development Corporation, and they still had problems. It is really kind of Quentin Lucas's board. They do what he wants. And I think a lot of what happened with the Royals earlier last year was because Quentin Lucas controls Port KC. He made promises to the Royals if they moved downtown that, because the voters rejected it, never came to be. But yes, I agree. Broadly, it is an out-of-control, poorly run, poorly overseen, and politically insulated group.
It's crazy, too, because, like, you think about ports, right? And it was like, well, it's about things along the riverfront. They're apparently getting involved in tax incentives on the plaza. I mean, last I checked, we ain't close to a river down there. I mean, we're close to a creek, but there ain't any rivers down there.
There is a dock on that creek. Maybe that counts as a port. Look, when I did the research for this a month ago, I found that of the 150 ports that are regulated or counted in the United States, the Kansas City port is 149, last or second to last. Ugh. But again, because the state regulations are written so broadly, they have kind of transformed the organization from a port, like you and I think of it, to kind of anything that affects commerce. And yes, they are in apartment buildings, they're on the riverfront, they're by the creek, they're all over town. And if the Royals are to build in Kansas City limits, you can bet that Port KC will be a part of it.
That's very true. All right. In Belton, developer is suing the city after the city council blocked a 252-unit affordable housing project despite months of prior support. Whose side are you taking there in Belton?
Well, they just filed the lawsuit. The developers just filed the lawsuit against the city of Belton on December 2. So, we're just starting this, but there are lots of things I'm critical about developers for doing, but this kind of breaks my heart because they negotiated in good faith with the city. They wanted to build, this apartment complex. It was on a piece of land that had been sitting undeveloped. It was an opportunity for the city to move more people in and collect more taxes. And then what happens, as happens in Kansas City and all over the country, is once you start going to the community meetings, all these people who show up have an inordinate amount of power to block development. And so they say no. They increase cost of development by dragging these things out. And the developer is alleging that in some of these meetings, people made bigoted comments or based their objection to the development based on, bigoted comments about who would be living there. So it's not unique to Belton. We see this again all over the region, certainly on the Kansas side, but it may be a great opportunity for people to learn that this type of community obstacle is making life worse for all of us.
Patrick Tuohey with the Show Me Institute. Always good to have him on KCMO. And look forward to Patrick filling in for a couple of days around Christmas and New Year's. So thank you for doing that ahead of time, my friend, and we will talk to you next week.
Great. Thanks so much, Pete. Take care.
All right. Patrick Tuohey. Good to have him.